Welcome to the Sales Confidence podcast with myself, James Ski, the founder and CEO of Sales Confidence. This is our opportunity to learn from world-class sales leaders, inspirational SaaS founders, and the next generation of salesperson bringing their value and inspiration to the market. This is probably one of the most exciting guests that I'm having on because it's Neil Ryland, who was the individual that gave me my first role into the SaaS industry. Neil, it's great to have you here.
James, always a pleasure. And I agree. I've been looking forward to this a lot. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, like honestly, I was just reflecting on this last night, and genuinely, obviously over 12 years now, we've built a close friendship. But without you opening the door for me, I may never have pursued this route, and I could have ended up doing something very different. Maybe I would have been stuck in recruitment now.
Oh no, so I saved you from that world. But to be fair, it set you up pretty well, mate. It set you up pretty well.
No, it's good. And we're going to get stuck in today. There's a lot of history between Neil and I, and there's going to be some great stories in this conversation, and look forward to learning more. So, I mean, that's kind of a good place to start, really, is just to find out what you're most excited about today, Neil.
In all honesty, when you messaged me on doing it, I know we catch up a lot, but I just have these flashbacks of those early days of Huddle and the fun and the excitement. It triggers memories, right, of those type of environments. So in all honesty, it's like catching up with an old friend rather than like a sales podcast. So actually excited about just having a good chat on some good times and some good memories.
I agree. And it's almost like, in some ways, it would have been cool if we could have captured all these stories over the years, right? Because we've had a lot of conversations one-to-one, especially when I was your subordinate, like chipping on your heels, wanting more pay rises and promotions. So it's actually nice to see, how far our careers progressed.
Amazing. And you were never my subordinate. I can't stand that word. You were an unbelievable colleague. And I say that in a nice way. Don't get me wrong, you're a pain in the backside at times, but
fair.
It's just brilliant to see this as well and how far you've come. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking through the journey.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Neil. So let's go back to where did we first meet then?
So you remember the days of Silicon Roundabout?
Yeah.
And it was like, the tech scene had just kicked off and Huddle were right on the roundabout, albeit the grungiest looking building on the roundabout. But we had, if you remember the boardroom, they had that glass view that looked over the roundabout. And we had our interview. And I said, obviously interviews have changed over time, styles, how you approach them. But what you're fundamentally trying to do is create some kind of connection with someone outside of stats on a CV. And I think you were the pioneer of pulling on the heartstrings when you showed at the end of your presentation a picture of your son Harry being like, please give my daddy a job. And I have this like photo box memory of that moment, sat with Matt Wise, and being like, we've got to give this guy a chance. We have to give this guy a chance. He's got all the raw materials to be unbelievably good at it. But what do you recall from that interview?
Well, it's funny, I do, because I remember the boardroom, looking over the roundabout, and I was on my lunch break. I had to run from my recruitment agency, which was like a boiler room, They sniffed out anyone that was in an interview, and I was sitting in my suit, ready to go over and try and impress. And I was desperate to get out of that agency. I was a new father. I was literally only 23. I really had the idea that tech was the industry that I wanted to get into. And I think Huddle, being a British founded business, on our doorstep, was a great opportunity. I don't recall why I had that moment, but I thought, I've got a kid, they need to know that I need the money and I'm going to work hard for this gig.
Yep.
So I snapped up that presentation, and I remember it sitting there thinking, one, to be honest, it's funny because I haven't really thought about it. I thought, it's quite a proud moment. I'm a dad, and you know that now because you're a father. And I was just like, I really want these guys to give me a chance, to prove what I can do. And, thankfully you did. So here we are.
Yeah. Oh, God, unbelievable times. I still remember that movie was Cumulus. Now I think back to it, named after all the clouds.
Oh my God, that is good memories. Yeah. So what, Huddle was it spawned so many fantastic individuals, businesses, people that came out of that journey. But what were your lessons from your time at Huddle?
God, I think there's so many, and you're right. I think Ali and Andy, who founded it, I think they probably still draw inspiration when they look at how many people have gone on to build careers in tech, of the fact they gave people a chance early, and the brand was so well known. I think the thing that I've taken from that into every role or any of these conversations, or where, you know, I'm humble enough that people ask for advice, is like the power of that culture. The power of that culture and the fact that people look back on it so fondly, and there are still friendships that are built off the back of it. So thinking around culture. I think on the other side, I think what we all learned from that is focus. And that was an exploding market. You know, you kind of go from, you know, the C drives to going in the cloud. We were kind of part of that big transformation. And there was so much you could do, like project management, document management, file sharing, like there was just wikis, you name it. And I think one of the things that I picked up from that was the power of focus. You know, be brilliant at one thing and nail it. And then I think the last thing, again, that I take with me is the academy. And we kind of touched on it with, you know, so it's our careers, but there are many other stories where if you make the investment in great individuals, then they can go on and do great things within your company. And, you know, there's the CFO is in the room. There's the practical things of people that have been in the company longer. They onboard into new roles much faster. They tend to be more loyal. They know the product. They care about the brand. So I think how you take that young talent, nurture it, and give people an opportunity. So I think those are the three things that always stand out for me when I think back on my time at Huddle.
Do you know what? I think back to the SDR Academy in particular, and I look at some of the individuals that came out of that and what they've gone on to do their career. So a bit of a side note, but I was in Australia for the first time earlier this year, seeing my sister, who's lived out there for 10 years, and Adam Godfrey.
Adam Godfrey?
Yeah, right. And like, you know, Adam and I got extremely close when we were at Huddle. And he'll admit, he probably won't mind me saying, like, he had some challenges adjusting to kind of the B2B SaaS world, and, you know, being in sales at the time. But literally, he's gone on to, like, you know, travel the world, move across the world, have a stellar career. And, like, there's just endless individuals that had an impact. And I think, you know, when I think about the inspiration around sales confidence, a lot of it came from how we fostered talent at Huddle and gave people a chance. Because I think also you know, it wasn't a case, there was a lot of diversity. It wasn't a case of that you had to be, you know, a Russell Group University candidate. That's not the profile that you were after. So, I mean, I'm going off on tangent, but what type of people were you looking for back then to join the business at that stage?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think actually at the core of it, the traits I look for haven't really changed. And you probably remember our acronym of LAT, which is like loyalty, attitude, tenacity. And I probably bore people I chat to on it, but it's because I just don't know how to coach those things. I don't know anyone that can coach them. I think those things are either innately important to you or they're not. And I think if you have that in your DNA, then in early stage startups, you've got every opportunity to be successful. And so like by loyal, I mean, like, you know, if plan A doesn't work, you know, you stick at it. There's 26 letters in the alphabet, keep going. I think there's the can-do attitude. I mean, you know, I'm sure we'll get onto it. There was tough days at Huddle. There's been tough days in sales conference when we've caught up. But, you know, like the sun does set and the sun does rise, right? And if you work with great people, you can pick them back up, right? There is no problem that can't be solved. And I think that kind of can-do attitude is something you kind of look for. And then that tenacity, right? Like trying to build in a startup and do something disruptive. You normally have a David of Goliath battle, right, in startups. You've got an enemy or a massive market you want to go and disrupt. You want to change. You want to get a piece of that pie. Well, you've got to have the fire in the belly to go and do it. Yeah, and I think people that come in with that energy and that passion to want to do it are those things that I looked for then and I look for now still, you know, in what, third startup gig.
Well, that's it. And it, like, you know, you've had an exceptional journey from Huddle. We're going to learn more about what you're doing today. But I guess once that journey at Huddle ended, how did you identify the next business, Peakon, and what were some of the highlights and learnings from that journey?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was interesting because I kind of was thinking, what do I want to do? Is it like, what do I really enjoy doing? And I love coaching. I love building. I realized that's my strength and what I get a kick out of. And then when I reflected back on what Huddle was doing, it was this kind of like explosion into a hot market that was disrupting something. And I was like, okay, well that sounds good. But what do I love about it? Culture. I love the people. And then I started thinking, like, well, how do you tell people how to do that? Like, and then people always go, have you got a good culture, a bad culture, classic interview questions. What's the culture like here? Work hard, play hard. Okay, how do you turn that into data? And that kind of got me thinking on what space I wanted to be in. I wanted to help people to build great cultures because if you have that, you've got a chance of winning. And that's kind of how it morphed. And I was lucky enough to know Casper, who was part of the Podio team, so they're kind of frenemies of Huddle. And so those connections were born, and I kind of just fell in love with the idea of like, could you take a data-driven approach to building a world-class culture that set you up to be successful? And then when I met the founders of Peakon, I could see they were people, but they also had big ambitions, big plans. They wanted to do something special and do it the right way. So that was kind of part of the thought process, and how I ended up in a very small Danish company. And I met some people like, "Are you crazy? Like, you know, they're like seed funded. They're like 15 people, and they're in Denmark. What do you know about Danish and Nordic culture?" But you know, you got to trust your gut sometimes. Of like, you know, are they great founders? I.e., do they care about people? Have they got big ideas? You know, is the market big enough to be successful in? And do you feel you can go on a learning journey there? And it ticked all those boxes. And I'm so grateful that the founders gave me that opportunity.
And what was the outcome for Peakon?
So we two things really. So one, very similar story to what we talked about on Huddle, right? In terms of some of the people that have now gone on and have great careers and successes. So that's one great outcome of it. But as a business, we exited to Workday in the middle of the pandemic, actually, for 700 million. And then I moved and transitioned into my role at Workday. So it was from zero to like, what was it, 75, 80 million turnover in 6-7 years. It was unbelievable. And some amazing people that I got to work with on that journey, and some brilliant customers as well that have become friends.
Love that. That's fantastic. You know, it's interesting when I have these conversations with you, it's almost like you could just take that chapter, you know, we could have a whole conversation. But I want to learn a bit more about you as an individual, because I think that's at the heart of, you know, the story. What's the first thing you typically wake up and think about?
Now, did I pack my daughter's nursery bag correctly? What have I forgotten for her before I go into work? No, I'm a kind of person of habits. You know, you know, I only wear the white shirts. I try to think like, what decisions can you kind of like take stress out of your life on? Because you have to make enough decisions in life and roles anyway, right? So, and also I'm not particularly good at fashion. So I was like, that's one that I can just sort. So I never have to worry about what clothes I'm going to wear. Typically I'm up. I've looked at my diary the day before, so I know what I've got to focus on. Tend to get in like the kind of classic kind of like cold shower, pint of water before I do anything else. And it just allows me to give 5 minutes to be like, yeah, what are the 3 things I need to get done today? And they're not always work related. They can sometimes be like personal things, but it's like whatever happens, those 3 things get done. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that just helps me to feel, you know, if you're having like it's quarter end, or you know you have to make a new market, whatever it might be. I'm going for a house renovation right now. There could be a million and one things. I think that just 5 minutes to set your day up is so important. I was talking about like how do you avoid the downward spiral? And you know those Monday mornings when you get out of bed, stub your toe, you spill coffee on your white shirt, your kid's sick on you miss the train. Like it's this spiral effect. And I think if you're able to kind of take those 5 minutes, that when those things happen, you can prevent the next 3 things happening, or they don't stress you out and cause 5 more things to happen. So I think finding that time has helped me to get into a better routine of how I operate compared to where I was, you know, probably even 5 years ago.
Good for you. And what about your own motivation and inspiration? Because, you know, you've obviously gone on to achieve huge things, but where do you think that comes from?
I think a lot of it comes from my family. I still like my family, you know, like I'm from a pretty rural part of Suffolk. And I think to challenge yourself against the best, you've got to go against the best, right? And the best typically are in the cities and in London. You know, I wanted to go out and better where I was and prove that I could be successful. And, you know, I get a lot of support from my parents, very lucky in that sense in terms of like morale and being proud. And I think that kind of motivates you to go on. And now I've kind of got my own family, and that gives me inspiration to, you talked around like you want to do the right thing by Harry. I mean, one of the reasons I'm at Normative of becoming a dad was like, you know, if she goes into school and says, what does your dad do? Like questions. I was like, I don't want it to just be like sales. You know, I wanted it to be like he's playing his part in something more meaningful, which is how I ended up in kind of climate change now. And I think the last part is like, and maybe it's cheesy, maybe it's corny, but it's genuinely true. I get such a kick out of, even when you mention like Adam Godfrey, you know, like, I get such motivation out of the people that I work with, and particularly people that I've been on the journey with. So at Normative, there's quite a few people that I've worked with previously. And my motivation now is like, they've put their trust in me, and I want to make sure they've got this amazing story on their CV. Like it's my responsibility to like make sure every day that they're feeling pumped and they're getting it. And that when they see that, I then kind of get like a massive kick out of it.
And to be fair to you, like that is a testament to the experiences that you've created for people. I did notice that, at Normative, there's a lot of people that you've worked with previously, and they want to follow you as a leader, and you're having an impact. And you're right, that's precious. Really, it's priceless. You can't really put a price on that, and so that's good to see. Obviously, we're a sales a podcast. What was your first experience of sales?
Yeah, I suppose like a lot of people, you kind of first thing is like, oh God, I need some extra money. So you're washing cars, you're trying to figure out ways that you can sell chewing gum. My birthday's November, so I learned to drive like faster than some other people. So I would be doing like McDonald's runs and putting like subchargers on top of like Big Macs, like all those things. But my first, I suppose, real experience of sales and where I failed and struggled was, I joke, my degree's in sports science. So I've got a degree in catching. But it got me into a lot of sales because I trained to be a personal trainer. And being a personal trainer, you've got to go into a gym and find a way to get people to want to train with you. I'm 5'0". It's not like I'm this 6'4" bloke that, hey, look, let me show you how to squat 200 kg. It's not that appealing. And then I really struggled to have the confidence to go up to people and build business. And then that's why I ended up having to like stop that. And I was more in debt I had my first year of work than what I was after university, because I kind of plowed so much money in trying to do this personal training business, my own other business, that I ended up similarly falling into sales kind of out of this desperation of like, I just need to get some money quickly and build up my confidence, because otherwise I don't know what I'm going to do. So that was my kind of first real adventure into sales, and a really unsuccessful one.
Wow, I'm sure you have told that story, but it's interesting to hear that people's starting points, from every angle. So yeah, cool to hear. If you think about the stages from being a PT, to where you are now, leading global sales teams, like what do you think's made you successful at each stage of your growth?
I think there's two things. I realized pretty quickly I didn't know anyone in the city. I didn't know anyone in the industry. And the only way you can do that is like commit and invest in your time in the people around you. And I genuinely wanted to absorb everything. And I still say that today. Like, if there's a chance to get out and do a networking event, if there is a way to stay in touch with people on LinkedIn, through WhatsApp groups now, I really invested in getting to know people. Like, that first role as an SDR, people talk about the account managers looking after the SDRs, like take them for coffees, you get to come on face-to-face meetings. I was that SDR that it was like, if you book 3 meetings, you can come out with me to a trip to Cardiff and do 3 face-to-face meetings. The thought of doing like a trip to Cardiff and 3 face-to-face meetings now, you're like, oh, really? But as an SDR, yeah, whatever you want. I will find a way to do that, because then I got a whole journey to Cardiff with a senior account manager, picking their brains on how they ran presentations, what research did they do before, and then ideally you want them to then help you back. And I think I still do that today, like in terms of I really wanted to invest in my network. And then the second thing is I try to live by the rule, and I definitely don't always do this, because it's hard. But like, if you work hard and you're always kind to people, if you just have those 2 things in the back of your head, I think you can go quite far. Like, and that's it. I'm not the best at cold calling. I'm definitely not the best at like running presentations. I'm not the best with data, but I always use my network to help me to plug the gaps. And I always say that you'd have to work really, really hard, or sweat pretty hard to beat me on work ethic.
That is fair.
And that was kind of and that probably has a negative side to it, which we should come to. But I think just as a mindset, I've always worked on my network. I've always tried to be the best version of myself that I can be, and be kind.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. We both share that work ethic, but I've seen your intensity of focus to continuously strive, even as you've reached these kind of additional milestones, is a great asset. So that's really, really interesting to see. You just like moving on now to where you're at today. Tell us a little bit about Normative, and also like what is the DNA of this company that you think it makes it a special place?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm now working on a company called Normative.io. So we're helping organizations on their journey to net zero. And obviously I'm biased, but I don't think there could be a bigger mission on the planet, right? We all live on the planet, and this mission impacts every single human being. And what we're helping organizations to do is to basically capture all the insights around their emissions. So where we choose to host this podcast, right the way through to like what trucks, vehicles do you drive, enable people basically to make better informed decisions on accurate carbon data, both for compliance reasons, but equally because this is like the biggest transformation that's happened probably since the Industrial Revolution, right? You could do it the digital revolution, but now organizations have to change their whole supply chains to try to hit net zero, but not just for their business and to make money and make opportunities, because otherwise there probably isn't going to be a planet, in years to come. So it's unbelievably exciting. What makes it exciting, I think, is that it's mission driven, and that sounds like quite a cheesy thing to say because I think everyone writes on the wall now we're a mission driven company. But what does that actually mean? It means that we hire against it. We hire people that genuinely care and can talk to it. But we want to win. That's what makes it special. We want to win. We want to win for the mission. We want to win for the individuals. I want this to be a culture where people look back and go, I learned so much on that journey. I went from SDR to AE. I went from AE into leadership, or whatever that journey is. And lastly, we want to win for the customers. So I think what makes it special is we have an adopted term that we took from Peakon, which I absolutely loved, which was, serious, not seriously. And what I mean by that is that we're in a really serious role, like working with big customers with a great big mission, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. Like life is short, right? You can always re-earn money, but you can't re-earn time. And I think therefore working in a company that you want to be part of is what makes us really, really special.
Interesting. So how does Normative generally benefit a company? Like what's the value prop?
Yeah, there's kind of two parts to it really. So the first part is, I think if someone said to you, what does carbon look like? It's quite a hard thing to picture. Yeah. So the idea is that we can make carbon visible for all, i.e. so that you don't have to be an ESG climate strategy expert to understand decisions that you can make as a leader to reduce your carbon emissions. The outcome of that is that, one, you need to be compliant. The world is moving to a world of compliance around this. This is no longer like put a green logo on your website and say you're doing the right thing. There are penalties and risks associated to not doing it, access to capital. But like with all these things, like the world's becoming more conscious in what we buy. So what markets you had access to before, you may not have access to anymore unless you're able to demonstrate that you are doing the right thing on a path to net zero. And Normative's job is to help to address both of those challenges.
In terms of what, just give us a bit of insight into the stage that you've joined, and you said the company wants to win. What's the ambition of the business?
Yeah, so I like I said, I kind of loved the building phase, and after the exit, and I worked at Workday for a while, and there's some amazing people in that company as well, and definitely learned a lot from being in a much larger corporate. There's some good things you can take from it. But I realized that my passion and what I love doing, what gets me up in the morning and smiling and happy is this build mode. So I wanted to join a company that had ambitions to become the standard, to be like the verb, you Google something, and I think Normative has the opportunity. We want to become the norm. When you think about the benchmark, the standard for understanding your carbon emissions, you think Normative. I think that's a really nice big goal to run at, and to say that you contributed to a net zero world. So I think there's a lot of big ambitions to do, and it's a very immature but also big market. I think that again is quite exciting. You have an opportunity to create the standards and lead, which gets you pumped up, right?
Yeah, I love that. We've got all range of listeners on this, those that are just figuring out how to get into sales, those at a later stage in their career. Just a bit on a more tactical side, just from a sales perspective, is there a sales book that you've kind of got inspiration from that you recommend generally to people? Yeah,
so there's always two that spring to mind. Actually, three. So I think one of the first sales books that I read, I'm not a great reader, thank goodness for podcasts now, but Customer-Centric Selling by Mike Bosworth. It's quite an old school sales book, but the reason I love it is that when you're struggling or you're having a tough time, right, or trying to get into sales, and I come from a world of sport, right, the idea is just do the basics really well. You rebuild your confidence, get the basics in place, and now your only enemy is time, right? But eventually you will get there if you're doing the basics consistently. I think that book is fantastic at just thinking about the right questions to ask, the right style of email follow-up. Everyone calls it hyper-personalization now and all those things, but that book covered that really early on. I think it's a great one to kind of go back to if you're having a tough time, and you can highlight the pages and pick up a couple of things, but yes, I'm going to apply that. The other book that I love is The Framework for Being Able to Pitch Anything. I think in today's world where, again, all the stats around like buyers have already made 70% decision, have all the information ahead of time, you don't have very long to capture someone's attention. And I think that book is very good at teaching people techniques around reframing and how to be very crystal clear within a couple of minutes around how you can understand what someone needs and wants and how you can kind of drive some connection to be successful. But the one that I would always recommend to people, to me, is the chimp paradox, because I think that helped me going through the phase of sales, in particular from the transition from being an individual contributor into leadership. I think you really, really need to understand yourself. If you're going to be able to coach others, you have to be authentic. People have to trust you. And sometimes you're making tough decisions that people don't like. In the short term, they really don't like you. But you hope, and I'm sure there's plenty of times we've had those conversations, right? But you like to think in the mid to long term, they'll look back and be like, yeah, I'm really glad that they guided me through that. But I think that has to come from that. You need to know yourself and what your core values are and what makes you the person that you are, so that you can build trust. If there's no trust, nothing works.
Absolutely agree with that. What are the best salespeople? What are the traits of the best salespeople that you've come across?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few people right from the huddle days. Like you always stand out for your work ethic. I come back to that as something like that's like my fundamentals. But I think then there's the some of the obvious ones that come up about being inquisitive. I think the number of times that we'd sat down and had conversations around like, I've got this idea on this account. I've got this idea of how we can do these account management plans. I've got this idea, and I love that, right? It's this idea of how do we get better? How do we get better? What are those kind of 1% of changes that you could just tweak and be brave enough to try them? And I think that's a really good skill set. But I think also over time, what it is, Steve Oben's another person that springs to mind a lot. But I think it's people that are really comfortable in their own skin. I think a lot of time when you're in sales and you're doing interviews, like there's this kind of idea that you put on like a different skin to convince people or persuade people to do things. And I think actually the best reps that I've come across, or the people that I've like bought from now, are the people that are just themselves and they're really comfortable being themselves. Like put after shower, but like my wife is in sales and she's fantastic at just being her. And I think that's why people end up being likable. And I think if you have that likable skill set, which comes from being humble and just being yourself, they for me are the best sales reps that consistently win.
Do you know what I think about this likability factor all the time. I honestly believe, to your point, if you are more self-aware, you practice humility and you are yourself, people warm to that.
Yeah.
And likability does matter. Like you said, you've got to capture people's attention. And people want to spend time with people they enjoy. If you've got to go through a process and do business with someone, you might as well enjoy the experience, or you're going to have to begrudgingly go for it. So I honestly feel like people really need to figure out and find out, are they likable? Because it's not something you're really taught. Like people sometimes have it naturally more than others, but I do think it's something that you can hone. So,
and they said every process, like you think that's the deals you've worked on over time. Like every process had speed bumps. Like if you're in a comparison in RFP, there's always going to be features this one have and you don't have, and vice versa, right? So you have to figure out, okay, well, what is that kind of magical above and beyond thing that they can't get from anywhere else? People can copy a product, they can copy a marketing message, they can't copy you. So how do you make you the USP? And I think the people that are likable can find ways to do that, and in abundance. And that's so important in startups, right? Because you're competing with the big guys that have way more resources, but they're never going to have you. So how many times people think about, how am I the secret weapon? And how do I come across in the right way to support this buyer through their journey?
Great advice. Great for people to reflect on. Sales has gone through, massive changes. Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I think probably every year, right, there's a new piece of tech that comes out that says that the kind of cold calling's dead, the old school sales is dead, and it's never quite to come to fruition. So I think the fundamentals will still stay the same to what we just talked through. But I do think the way that people buy changes. The explosion of AI is a classic example where you get asked a lot of what are you doing, and I think a lot of it's how do you drive better productivity. If I look at the great tools that exist now, it's like the sales loft and the outreach, or they've changed from when we were like trying to send out emails the whole time, and thank goodness for like Grammarly. That was like a big change for us, right? Of like getting that right. And now you can automate cadences and not do anything. And now someone can write your cadences for you. But like really practical example of how we've applied this at Normative is like, we still have the highest conversion rates to demos when we're on the phone, when we're speaking to someone. And those demos have the highest conversion rate to closed won revenue because they speak to someone, they meet someone, they get to share their challenge. We're still humans. You still want to connect with the human. And therefore, I think actually what we use AI for is to take out some of the stuff that maybe humans aren't as good at. So supporting on emails, doing the research. But what it does is it frees up the time to do the stuff that a machine's never going to be able to do, like build a human connection. And I think, we measure now like our basically our handover meetings and how many spoke to human. Since that's such a 2023 statement, isn't spoke to human rather than spoke to robot. But we can now track that data. And it frees up the team to spend more time doing that. So I think actually what it's going to transform is that even more you have to focus on your personality skills, your interpersonal skills, your collaboration skills, because otherwise a robot could do it. So I think that's one thing that people will think more through. And then the other thing is, how do you create more and more of these the B2C kind of selling experience? Like, how do you find ways to create a more engaging sales environment where the buyer can really get involved in what you're doing rather than static presentations? Everyone is fed up with Zooms, right? And I think there has to be a way, when we think about how the whole time, how do we engage with more in the process, whether that's collaborative tools of going through it, like the portals of interacting with presentations, helping to build them, access to the product. I was saying like Dropbox are the masters, or were the masters of the kind of freemium, well, it's now called product-led funnel, isn't it? But I think those things will really change the way that we continue to sell.
Yeah, definitely. So, like, taking into account how sales is changing, the type of top performers that you've come across, like, what advice would you give a salesperson early in their career that's trying to navigate this and wants to become a successful leader in your shoes later on in their career?
Yeah, let me reflect on. But I think there's three things that always come to mind, and one is, if you want to be successful, you're going to have to work hard. And I wish there was like this amazing answer. I say, all you have to do is this, and this. But the fundamentals are going to have to work hard. That, or you're going to have to play the lottery a lot and hope you get lucky. But I want to bet my career on being lucky. So I think one thing is you've got to work hard. I think the second thing is just be yourself. Be comfortable being you, and people will like you. Just be comfortable being you. That work hard, be kind to people. And the third one is invest in your network. I'm so grateful that I got to work with some unbelievable leaders. If like my first manager, Dave Mead, we talked about Matt Wise earlier, Simon O'Kane, Leslie Young in the US, Phil and Casper at Peakon, and now Christian, the founder at Normative. Like, I've just worked with some great people, and I've invested time getting to know them and how I can support them. How can I make their lives a bit easier? But then the trick is, I was thinking, like, when you sell a deal and it gets passed to the customer success team or your account management team, how often do you check back in with that person? And I think people that do that would be my advice. Invest in your network, be comfortable in your own skin, and you work hard, give it your all. Good reminders.
We're all about confidence at Sales Confidence. Where do you get your confidence from?
Believe it or not, I'm not always about a particularly confident person. I kind of have to mentally motivate myself sometimes to do it, and I'm driven a lot by the fear of failure. So my confidence sometimes comes from the fact of I don't want to regret the things I've done, but I know I'll regret the things I didn't do. And I think that's why I went traveling as a kid. It's like how I ended up playing rugby. It's I'm now giving golf a go because I'm getting a bit old and slow, but I think my confidence, and I don't know if it's good advice or not, but it's the truth, is I found out what motivated me, what makes me happy, what makes me sad, and be I don't want to be in that position. That's way worse than just being brave and getting up on that stage and doing that presentation. I don't want the person who goes, he didn't want to do the presentation. And then I think the second thing that helps me with confidence is I prep. I know that that's one of the challenges that I have, so I invest the time to prepare to give me confidence. And again, I come back to your network. Lean on your network. I feel confident doing a podcast with you because I know that I could connect with you beforehand. I could do my prep, have the conversation, etc. And so I come on to this being this is just two mates chatting. Well, I've done some podcasts before where you've got the screens all around you, or whatever, and you're tap, 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 and people can see it. So I think figuring out what makes you nervous, and taking a deep breath, doing your prep correctly, and again, chat to someone on it. It's no shame in not feeling confident sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. there's people around you that can fill the gaps and kind of lift you up. And often our self-talk narrative puts you down.
Yep.
And you take for granted for the skills and where you've come. I mean, even again, because we've known each other for so long, and so like this is quite a nostalgic moment having this conversation. Last night and this morning on the way here, I was like reflecting. And of course, sometimes I look at, my journey in business, and there's so much more I would have hoped to achieve, or so much further that I would have got. And then I actually take a step back and think, well, like I was that guy that ran down the road from a recruitment agency, had no understanding of what SaaS was 12 years ago. Now I'm sitting in a professional podcast studio interviewing the guy that gave me that opportunity, and all sorts of other cool things in my life, and 3 kids. And like you do sometimes forget the journey that you've been on, because we're chasing new goals, new targets, especially in sales. And I'm about to publish my first book, How to Build Sales Confidence. And I even think about that journey. But one of the areas in there is like around gratitude. And if I'm honest, in my 20s, and trying to kind of climb the ladder in various software companies, I don't think I really paused much to reflect. It's only as I've got kind of more mature and I've settled down into life and family life, where I'm like, do you know what? Actually, you just got to be grateful for where you're at right now.
Yeah. And the take stock of it, I think it's a really important thing. In the diary, I give this advice to my team now, and I wish I'd done it earlier in my career, that I have in my diary think time. And it's a genuine blocker in my diary, because that allows me just to like make better decisions. When you're racing around the whole time, you only ever see what's in front of your nose. And therefore you often make a mistake that creates more workload further down the line. So I think it's really important to take that time to think and just reflect. And you're right, outside of work, when you're feeling a bit stressed, just take a look at how far you've come. And everyone will have been on a journey that should take some pride in to get where they are today. And the good thing is that you've always got tomorrow to kind of step up again when you need to. So I think it's really good advice to share with people.
Great advice. Well, on that journey, have you experienced some kind of hardships on your journey that you've kind of had to break through and overcome?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their moments, and it's how you overcome them. And like, I think the first thing is to remember, like, you're never as bad as what you think you are, and you're also never as good as sometimes what you think or other people think you are, and trying to find that nice, steady equilibrium the whole time and find your ways that keeps you in there. But I had 2016, I always think is like one of the scars, and I think scars are there to remind you that you can come through tough times. I had a really tough year, I'd split with a partner at the time. I just made this big jump into this new tech company where it's like my first time going in as a CRO, rather than like internal promotions, where you've earned your credibility, earned your stock, right? So you naturally have this level of confidence going into it. Whereas this was like, you're hired, build it. There isn't someone above me that can kind of give me air cover or anything else. It's like, this is your baby, you need to run it and build it. And I'd lost a family member at the time. It just felt like the ground underneath me just wasn't stable at all. And I had to really, and that's when I read The Chimp Paradox. And it really came back to like, okay, like, what are the things that I can control that are really important to me? And I'm going to focus on those. And it also gave me the kind of strength to go like, everyone looks at like where their gaps are, where their weaknesses are, the things they're not great at. And you spend ages trying to make yourself a 3 out of 10 on something that maybe is just not your thing. Whereas you're a 9 at something else, and you could probably get that to a 10. And that's a bigger multiplier than going from a 1 to a 2 on something that you're not great at. It's one of those performance review things. It's like, where are your weaknesses? It's like, I think it's so important to show people what their strengths are and give them the ability to double down on them. Because then they feel good. It builds confidence. So I think that was a really tough year where we had to like self-reflect on some of the things that I really enjoy doing, that I think that I can be even better at, and focus on those now. But yeah, there's everyone's had tough quarters, months where you don't sell, and my advice in those situations is go back to the basics, spend time with peers and mentors, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And work hard.
Well, thanks for sharing. And it's that type of resolve that allows you to kind of develop and progress. So thanks for the honesty.
And just on that, I think you're like a really good example of that. And I think we talk around like, how do you come across as likable? It's about showing the vulnerabilities. I think so many people still don't do that. Now there's an art of like, you can overshare, of course, but like, I think there is an element of it being you, and that includes your vulnerabilities, and that helps to make people likable. And the other skill I've always admired about you, like even when the early huddle days, when it comes to your recruitment skill, it's just a natural thing that you're great at. It's like, I don't know how well this translates globally, but the word favor in the English language is a phenomenal one, right? Because it's very hard to say no to a favor. Yeah. So one, do them for people. It's the right thing to do. It's part of being kind, but also don't be afraid to ask for them. Yeah. And I think that's really important when you're having tough times, because you'd be amazed how people want to help you as well.
That's fair. And I appreciate that observation. One of the things I've tried to, navigate, obviously, as you know, I've got my bipolar diagnosis, and I've had these kind of intense admissions into hospital. And, I always kind of, you're absolutely, there is a balance now, because we are more open generally, I think, as a generation and society. And I think also social media, to a positive, has allowed people to open up. But I do feel there is this oversharing sometimes. And I'm always a bit mindful of the balance of how much you kind of open up. But I still do believe genuinely, like, people's lives aren't all roses. That is the reality. So, if you are just continuously curating an image that isn't, your story, people can sniff it out. And I think there's a lot to be said for, opening up and sharing some of those vulnerabilities. You don't need to share it all, and there's a time and place to do it. But I think it definitely helps people understand you, and that, people will find their levels to relate to you at different levels to kind of get a connection.
Right? So the whole thing that sales confidence is brilliant at, and the word there is, if you create a persona that's not you, you're creating a pedestal that you're trying to now live up to, and that's that's like a confidence gap, right? You've created your own confidence gap that you didn't need to. You're most confident being you, because that's all you can ever be. So be it. The more you do this, I think sometimes the harder it is to be confident, and I think that's a great thing again that your networking, your story brings to people, and hopefully other people can then learn from that, of like the best version of you is you. Yeah,
I agree. So we're motoring through this conversation, and I could spend hours here exploring more of your stories and experience. Just what do you do just to manage kind of your well-being and health?
Yeah, it definitely gets harder as you become a family man, right? But I think again it comes down to being committed to the tasks you need to do that day. Like there's always time to do it. It's just what you choose to prioritize. And I find the time to make sure that I go to the gym 3 times a week, because I know that helps me to be better at work. It helps me to be a better dad. It helps me to be a better husband. Like all those things. So I kind of link it to the fact of like, to my whole self requires these elements, and therefore I have to get them done. So I think about them in a task state. I also try to make sure that I block out time in my calendar to do the things that are really important. I want to make sure I'm home to put Flo to bed, for example, on certain times, and therefore I can shift my working hours. I'm very fortunate in the roles we work in that enable us to do that, which is very, very lucky. But I think then it's also around how you spend your weekends. I think that's another part to it. I like, you have to take time out. When I talk about like working hard, it's around like when you're on, be on. If you're going to go for a run, go for a run. Like don't do 50%. I think that's the trick to it for me, is like when I'm going to do something, I'm all in, and that allows me to manage my time of like, that's my block for doing this, and that's my block for doing this.
Great.
Pint of water in the morning is a good tip. Like I got that from a friend of like, before we do anything else, drink a pint of water, and it's amazing how that like makes you feel fresh for the day rather than smash 3 coffees.
Yeah, definitely. I'm more of the water option than coffee. So final question. Like, obviously got to learn a huge amount about you today, your perspectives, your experience, and I'm sure people would have got all this way in the conversation. What would be your final parting thought or comment for the listeners?
Yeah, good. I think the main takeaway I took away from my career, especially when I joined Normative, of like, okay, what am I going to do differently? Like here, how can I learn from the things that I've learned from my past 2 experiences? And I think one of these is when you have a decision to make, right, there's an easier option, there's a tougher option. And the reality is the tougher option is normally the right one. And I think that is something that I took into this role of like, make those decisions earlier. Yeah, and that can be anything. It can be around like what ICP you go after, like, who you hire, who you let go, like, But I think just in my head, I now look and go, okay, what's the easy option and what's the tough option? Because the tough option is the right one. And then it always sticks in my head around like, life is short. So for those at any stage in their career, like money is a byproduct of being happy and being successful. And the one thing you can never do is re-earn time. That's it. Once you've spent it, it's a currency you can't get back. So I would say, like, think about what you love doing and focus on doing those, right? Because you can re-earn the money, So they're kind of the pioneers, and your network. I bang on about it, and it's not just because I'm on sales confidence. If you listen to other podcasts or advice I give to people, it's like, work your network, commit to it, commit to doing favors for people, because the world will then do you favors back. And I think that's the best advice I could give to someone, is make sure that you really, really work your network.
Great advice, Neil. It's been a pleasure.
Mate, always so good to see you.
Finally got here. It's been too long. Awesome. You've been listening to the Sales Confidence podcast. Check out salesconfidence.com for details on our membership and how to become part of the community. Cheers, Neil.
No worries, James.